Lord Mayor, Master, Alderman, ladies and gentlemen, it is a huge honour to be invited to speak to you today. I've been looking forward to it just as long as we first discussed it about 9 months ago. And so here I am, and I'm going to be able to present to you this evening a presentation that no one in the world has ever seen before. So it's quite a special moment. So where am I going to start? Well, basically, I'm going to start by just explaining that I need to hold your feet to the fire a little bit on the problems that we're facing, which some of you, I'm sure, will be aware of. But then I'm going to talk about what action is actually being taken around the world to deal with it. And I would like to say that what we are doing in my trust is very much in the middle of all of that. And then I'm going to talk about turning data observatories into data collaboratories. And I'm going to tell you how that notion came about. I'm then going to go on and talk about how innovation in law, finance, accountancy, building services, all of those things can play a key role in transformational change, which is what we need. And I hope that I'll convince you that you could join this journey and make a very big difference globally. And so finally, I'm going to talk about how the City for Cities could maybe take off in a very practical way. And I want to engage as many of you as possible in the journey from today. So let me talk a little bit about growing global instability. And there is an awful lot of it, and you've all experienced it since 2008. So let's go back to basics. We live in a solar system where basically we get energy from the sun, we get bombarded with asteroids occasionally, but basically it's fairly stable. But human activity, fueled by the Industrial Revolution, has grown the money supply and grown the exploitation of resources very dramatically, supported by the Bank of England and the county banks in the UK, who led this, and is now being taken up by countries all over the world like China. And basically what we are doing is destroying the ecology on the planet very systematically. And we now know that human well-being will not go forward positively if we continue to do this. So therefore we have to do something about bringing ecological systems into our purview of the way forward. Secondly, as population has grown over the last 100 years, 100 years ago, we had about 8 hectares of land to support one person's life on the planet, and that has now gone down to 2 hectares, a factor of 4, because the population has grown by a factor of 4 on a fixed amount of land. And we're living as if this hasn't happened. So here you have this very rapid change. In China, the amount of land they're now using for development is 2.3 hectares, whereas in America it's 9.5, which is about 4 times the resources we actually have available. Now, the urbanization process in China is growing that 2.3 by 4% a year, which doesn't sound very much, but if you multiply 4% by 1.3 billion people, you will find you need 100 million hectares of new land every year to support the urbanization process and increasing consumption of materials and food in China. China is all over the world, in Africa, South America, Southeast Asia, trying to find those resources, but has realized that this is not a sustainable way forward. So if you think the Chinese economy can continue to grow in the way it has, it can't, and China knows that it can't, and has to find a new way. Also, food production per capita is beginning to level off and is, in some respects, on average, is now going down per capita because we've sort of exhausted the ability to use fertilizers and advanced agricultural techniques and manage water. So actually, we've got a real problem in food production too. Now, you've heard a lot about climate change and carbon emissions, but did you know that the amount of carbon emissions that we put in the atmosphere every year, which is about 6 billion tons, if you look at the natural carbon cycle, which is the combination of what happens in forests and oceans and so on, that's about 200 billion tons, which is cycled by the natural world every year. So basically, if we affect the 200 billion tons a year cycle, then that's very, very serious in relation to climate change. And therefore, we have to embrace an Earth systems approach to understanding how to manage all of that. But we know that the carbon dioxide emissions in the atmosphere is going up steadily. And this year, as you know, it reached 400 parts per million. It's beginning to drop again because of the growth of the forests in Northern Europe, but it'll be back at 400 by the autumn. And then, of course, we dig these resources up out of the ground, we manufacture things with them, and we throw them away, and we pollute the air, the soil, and the water. And again, this is having a drastic effect on our health, but also on the health of ecological systems. I've taken a few quotes from an IBM paper on some of these problems: the water, energy, food crisis, the mounting costs of health, the number of old people that need to be taken care of as we successfully live longer, the fact that 180,000 people a day are moving to cities all over the world, and cities are subject to really violent, increasingly violent storms and problems, which is why resilience is so important. So basically, what is the world doing about this? Because there's an awful lot of people who know all this stuff. So what are we going to do about it, and what are we doing about it? Well, the first thing that's happening is the United Nations has set up something called the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, which is led by Jeff Sachs out of Columbia University in the States. And this has provided technical support to the development of the Sustainable Development Goals that will replace the Millennium Development Goals towards the end of 2015. And the process, which I've personally been involved in relation to cities, has involved top scientists, engineers, financiers from all over the world. And we've now got to a point where there are 10 Sustainable Development Goal targets which are being debated and discussed and will be eventually agreed by the United Nations towards the end of next year as the goals for the world to go forward. And these goals do address all of the things that I've just talked about. And so there is an attempt to create a holistic set of goals which will enable us to start thinking about what to do, but then how do we actually do it? China, I would say, is ahead of the world in understanding these problems. So when the new president came into power, the first thing he did was change the legal constitution in China to now require a scientific approach to development and also to make ecological progress. This is now a legal requirement of all development in China. In parallel with that, they've now set up environmental courts, as I'm sure the lawyers will know, and also they've established a circular economy law because they've recognized that recycling and reusing materials is going to be fundamental to their ability to look after human well-being as more and more people move to cities. Now, the other thing that China has been doing is reforesting itself through agroforestry. And one of the reasons why I called my trust the Ecological Sequestration Trust was being completely inspired by what China has done in the Upper Lhasa Plateau, where some 20,000 square kilometers has been reforested with agroforestry by local people doing this for themselves with help from the World Bank. And this area is now a rather lush and verdant and productive area where people have a lot more income and to support themselves. And in a minute, you'll see my only bee in tonight's presentation, because bees are now flourishing in the Upper Lhasa Plateau in an area that was completely desolate. And so bees, of course, are really important to our future. And these reforestation projects are a way of demonstrating that we can substantially influence the development path if we develop ecological systems alongside the built environment. Now, McKinsey did an excellent report for the Ellen MacArthur Foundation on the circular economy, and there are now 100 companies being asked to sign up to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation campaign. And this report does show the business opportunities that lie in a circular economy system, which is pretty essential essential to solving these problems. And one of the things the report did was set out very clearly the innovative business models that are necessary to make this happen. And that is moving from selling things and building things to selling services for people, and to have performance-based procurement and delivery systems, which actually means you're paid for the outcome of the things you build rather than actually building a low-cost entity. And they also flagged up the fact that cross-cycle, cross-sectoral collaboration was essential for this to work, that transparency is necessary for those of you in accountancy, and that the financing and risk management approach was critical to delivering these outcomes. And finally, education was a key component. So I've taken all these issues and tried to embed them in a practical way forward, which the world can use. When we're designing buildings, we need to design them so at the end of their life, the raw materials can be recycled, they can be reconditioned, they can be reused, and so on. And this should be part of every design commission for the built environment that we have. So this is all about resource efficiency of closed-loop systems, and it's about food, it's about raw materials, it's about water, and it's about energy. We know from experience, and you can see this from the leadership of cities all over the world, that doing this at a regional scale is the only way we're actually going to deliver this transformation process. It's almost impossible to do it at a national scale. So at a regional scale, we need to bring together an understanding of resource systems and flows. We need to find ways of actually creating scenarios to test future opportunities and to measure the economic, the social, and environmental benefits of complete systems change. And this is really the big issue that I've been trying to tackle with a wonderful team. So now imagine, and this is where we're trying to get to, imagine a website where you have a spinning globe. And on this website, you can select any region on the planet, and you can select your region and draw a red line around it, and up comes a form where you can fill in a license application, and this could be the LEP in Northampton, by the way. You can fill in the application form, you can get a loan, and then you can download from the cloud an integrated systems platform to enable you to start planning your region in a way which is productive. And I'll return to this at the end, but those of you in business can have apps on this platform so you can sell your value-added services to the regions that download this platform. So here is the platform. Here is the integrated systems platform model, where everything under the ground is there, everything at ground level is there, the ecology is there, the movement of people is there, the resource flows can be modeled, and basically you can begin to plan interventions which integrate those and understand the benefit of bringing ecology forward. And at the boundary condition, you can connect to a global systems platform. Now, how is this possible? Am I able to stand here today and say that this is now a doable proposition? Well, this is one of the critical reasons why I can do it, and that's Earth observation systems and Earth observation data. We now have satellites circling the Earth that provide both medium and high resolution data for every piece of land on the planet. There's a group of young people in California who just launched 26 satellites from the Earth Observation Center that will photograph every piece of land on Earth every day and provide that information for use on the planet. At the same time, we can then build digital Earth models to enable us to understand the Earth systems. And at the same time, we can build digital models of our region that we've chosen from the website. With 3D visualization, we can connect them up, and the region can understand the impact of changes in climate, and we can move forward. So in the last 3 years, I formed a fantastic partnership with Bob Bishop, who's sitting in the middle of the audience there, who is creating the International Center for Earth Simulation. And Bob's vision was very similar to mine. Mine was to develop a regional simulator. Bob's idea was to build an Earth simulator. And we're going to make these platforms talk to each other going forward. And we're going to call our regional simulator resilience.io, and that will be the website. Now, how is it possible to connect you as businesses and communities to this regional platform? Well, here's another IBM slide. Over the last 20 years, the world has deployed a global high-bandwidth network, created a population of over 1 billion internet users, and a population of some 6 billion mobile telephones, which are growing all the time. And we've embedded billions of sensors in our environment and infrastructure, so we can have ground-based sensors talking to our platform, as well as digital Earth observation coming down. So basically, it is possible, partly because of the computing capacity that we're now able to mobilize from integrated systems computing. And this, again, is something that Bob Bishop is a world leader in understanding the potential of that. That means we can connect up people in the favelas in Rio, the communities in deprived parts of the UK, and they can start providing crowd data into the platform and start building a trusted, collaborative platform that we can start doing planning and integrated thinking together. Business community, public sector communities, all working together around a practical platform. But the big innovation that the Trust has brought is the ability to create a systems model that connects human systems, ecological systems, and economics for the first time. And this is really the big innovation. Everything I've showed you so far is here and now. What we're doing is creating a systems platform that enables those people in the favela to be part of an integrated systems model of the city, to enable us to understand the value of ecology to human well-being, the value of resource efficiency to the overall economics of the city for the first time. So how have I been able to bring people together to do that? Well, what I did was I targeted the world-leading modelers in each of the components that are necessary to do this. And that's Imperial College with the Sin City model that was created with BP funding about 5 years ago for resource systems in cities. The European Institute of Forestry's forestry model, which the European Union invested some 30 or 40 million euros in creating. The Profile Soil Agricultural Model for Soils, which was created at Lund University in Sweden. And most important of all, the only economist that I could find in the world who understood how to connect human value to economics, which is the Institute for Integrated Economics Research in Zurich, who are absolutely fundamentally important to the ability to establish such a new approach. So here we have our platform, and we can pull in the Earth systems data from Bob's Earth simulator. We can pull in Earth observation data into the land plane to enable us to see what's going on in ecology and human development. We can crowdsource mobility data from mobile phones and other data that people put into the system. The model will actually calculate the resources that come from human and ecological systems. Because there's nothing special about us. The ecology moves resources around just like we do, and we need to understand how it all integrates together. And the platform will deliver that. And then finally, we can plug and play the utility system. So if the utility companies have got their existing models, they can be plugged into the platform. If they don't, they can build their own models to show how the resources are flowing and how, if we develop, we might need some more of those things. So basically, here's the City of Manchester. So in the City of Manchester, if we decide to build a high-speed rail into Piccadilly Station and improve the metro lines, we can understand the economic value of increasing density of development around the stations, and we can understand the economic value of putting green trees in the streets where the metros are running. Those are two practical examples of what this platform can do in relation to improving city life. In my time in Arab, I asked people all over the world how much money was invested in Hong Kong, in Singapore, in Dubai, in Abu Dhabi, in metros as a percentage of GDP. And what I discovered on average is that cities that invest 1% of GDP a year in metros actually have a great metro system after 20 years, 1% of GDP. Now, nobody knows this. What we need is platforms that enable people to understand the connection between investment of that level in creating a city that's fit for human well-being in the future. And I believe we need that understanding. So then we come to the city of Seoul. Now, the mayor of the city of Seoul had the vision to believe the economics of the city would improve if he took the road out and replaced it with a river so that people could walk and cycle from the edge of the city into the centre where the air quality would be better, the footfall in the shops would be higher, and it was an inclusion project where people who didn't have jobs could find jobs in the city centre. This was a fantastic economic success for Seoul, but he didn't have any tools to prove it until afterwards. What I want cities to do is to have the tools to understand that this is the way we can develop well-being in cities for the future. So here is my story. One of the cities we were targeting was in India. And we decided to target the city of Surat to put the platform into. And we had a wonderful workshop in the city of Surat with the communities. And the city of Surat cuts and polishes 80% of all the world's small diamonds. Why is that? Why is a city in India that nobody's ever heard of cutting and polishing 80% of the world's diamonds? So at the end of the workshop, they said, you must come to a diamond factory and find out what this is about. I had no idea what a diamond factory was. Well, what it was a modern 8-story office block in which 2,500 people were working with little workstations no bigger than this what's in front of me here. And the first process that happened was the rock came in there and somebody did a radar survey and an X-ray of it and produced a 3-dimensional diagram of the rock, which you can see top right. And then they got the diamond shapes from the library and they were positioning 3-dimensional diamonds, which you can just about pick out in the picture, into this rock to enable them to maximize the amount of diamonds that could come out. So they were in a position where the laser cutting machine in the next cycle would then cut them out and then the facets would be polished. Each of these processes had 7 villages competing to do this most effectively, and every day the 7 people from the 7 villages were competing to maximize the value out of every process. And the people were not paid a salary. They were told that if they worked to the age of 35, they would get a house and a car. The money they earned would go back to the village and they were given accommodation. That is how Surat cuts and polishes 80% of the world's diamonds. So when I'd been round this thing, I thought to myself, what on earth is this about? Human nature, what is going on here? And we went up to the top of the building and there was a big picture window and I was looking out over the city. And I thought to myself, what is it about this value proposition that's driven this? And then I suddenly realized, and it sort of hit me, and I think 1 or 2 people in this room probably remember that moment and said, what's up with you? And I said, I've suddenly realized that the reason for this is these diamonds have a very clear global value. Everybody knows what a diamond's worth, and so we know exactly how to optimize this business to continue to make money with people working in villages all over India. And I looked out over the city and I suddenly realized that if we had a 3-dimensional digital model of the city with all the resource flows in it, we could then cut and polish the city. And if we understood the value that comes out, there will be 2,000 people in buildings in every city in the world cutting and polishing cities to create value for the human race. And for me, this is what it's about. It's about creating a platform that connects human value directly to all the decisions that are taken in our built environment every day. And it's unbelievable that the human race has got to this point in human development without ever having it when you consider we have models of bodies, we have models of just about everything you can imagine, and we haven't bothered to really focus on the built environment and the way we live. So basically, if we can work out the value to business, the value to society of improving energy, water and food security, of cleaner air, better quality of life, there will be 2,000 people in buildings all over cities all over the world, cutting and polishing them. They probably come from Arup, from AECOM, from wherever. It doesn't matter where they come from, but that's what will happen if we get this right. And so, as Fiona knows, I then moved into a process in India of talking to the Chamber of Commerce about this. And immediately they said, what we need is a collaborative environment in which to do that, which is exactly what was happening in the diamond factory. So we need to bring communities, public sector and private sector together to manage such a platform. And it was very clear very quickly that this would create collaborative intelligence, so that individual sectors are very, very intelligent and very clever. But if we can work together in a collaborative way around value, we can probably lift human intelligence to a level which is 20, 30, 50 times higher than it is at the moment. And I genuinely believe that is possible through this process because we've never done it. And I've experienced some collaborative design processes in Arup where we saw that happening. It's also very important that education is part of this. So we're working with Inua and other companies to develop MOOCs that can be used all over the world to provide MBAs for businesses to use this platform in a way that maximizes the future benefit. So we want to have online teaching and education programs linked to using the platform. Now, in Europe, if you don't know this, there is a program for data called Inspire. All governments in Europe are now layering data into platforms by law to bring social, economic, and environmental data into common use. The Netherlands has done this way ahead of other countries, but it is happening in the UK. And this platform you're seeing here is in operational use in the Netherlands for city planning, using all the layers of data in the Inspire database. And that Inspire database covers geology, it covers water bodies, it covers land use, it covers the built environment, it covers social and economic parameters. And we are building these databases in the UK. But do we have any way to use them? No, we don't. So basically, what we are doing is adding to this existing capability in Holland the ability to add social and economic outcomes to testing different built environment design problems. And I hope you can see from this video, if you add the social and economic dimensions into this, just how powerful our design approach could be in the future, and how important a three-dimensional visualization and technology is to enable this to be done. So at the heart of this process will, in a sense, be a sort of gaming tool, a bit like a three-dimensional gaming tool, that designers and investors and financial experts and lawyers can use to improve the built environment. And so this is very much what we can imagine. Now, what is the key link in the economics model between ecology and human well-being? It is basically the fact that if we improve air quality, water quality, soil quality, and nutrition, human health will improve, health costs will go down, which means that the burden of health costs on the economy reduce, and human productivity goes up. We know these things, so why aren't we taking this into account? So this platform will make those connections through algorithms, and at the same time will give an opportunity to look at the skills that are needed in the future for the investments that we're planning, so we can actually make sure that people are trained ready to take up the jobs in the future that are expected to happen. And for example, in terms of resource efficiency, by improving resource efficiency, money can be freed up for training, money can be freed up to have more people working in a particular scenario rather than less people, because we're not spending as much money on resources and waste that we didn't need. The other important point is cultural roots and cultural planning. I know from my experience in Arup that if people are facing big change, that they often object to it because of a loss of memory of the past. So what we need to do in the platform is to build the cultural history of the place and the past, which you've gradually been doing in the City of London, so that actually as people look forward, they know that the platform contains the history of the past and they're more interested in the journey into the future. And programs like the London Leaders Programme, which I was involved in kicking off in the Sustainable Development Commission in London, are ways of engaging communities with these sorts of programs. And I've also set up a Culture Futures program globally, which has shown that this is a very exciting prospect all around the world. In China, they are building a cultural record, not just of human developments, but also the way the natural world has evolved over history. So these are the UNESCO sites in China, where they're developing a record of the cultural history of those sites and even the natural history of those sites, and the way that the hills were eroded by rain, so that people have a cultural history of where we've come from to understand better how the natural environment might be affected in the future. So where does this bring you in? Those of you who are lawyers, those of you in finance, those of you in insurance, in services, in accountancy, and so on. Well, how do we draw you into this? Well, basically now, hopefully you've got the idea that this platform could be in use in many places around the world, and I'll show you where we're going to demonstrate it in a moment. But the next big point is about procurement. Now, many of you will be thinking, well, this is all very well, but how do we procure to maximize social, economic, and environmental outcomes? Because in the past, we've gone for lowest first costs, which tends to squeeze out the social and environmental benefits. This platform will be a procurement platform to enable you to test in a competitive environment different interventions of infrastructure, of buildings, and so on, to look at the social, economic, and environmental outcomes and actually procure against demonstrating those outcomes in the platform and then demonstrating them in real life going forward. And that is the transformational change that we need in order to make this happen. Unless we link this to finance and procurement, it's a dead duck. So basically, the platform will be set up to do this. And that means, therefore, that in talking to pension funds, in talking to multinational banks, and talking to people who want to put their money into patient capital investments, this platform can be used by local people to create the good projects that will enable them to be financed by patient capital and make them bridge that terrible divide at the moment between good projects and the very large amount of capital that is available in the world. And the capital can then be assembled into a regional investment fund, which can be a portfolio of clean tech, of climate adaptation funding, of social impact bonds, and many other things. And they can then be drawn down into projects, and the region will know that they will not get that money unless they use the platform to actually design and procure those projects. And that means the platform itself can be funded out of a 1% levy on the capital flows that it creates in the region to enable the region to move towards high-quality, inclusive, resilient growth. And that basically is the business model for setting this platform up and enabling it to be sustainable in the region and to be improved and developed going forward. And I have to say, I have spoken to the World Bank, I've spoken to the Asian Development Bank, and they are both extremely interested in this approach, and we will be certainly working with them. Now, for those of you in the insurance sector, of course, we know we're facing these increasingly extreme events, and of course, we heard yesterday from the Met Office in the UK how we're going to face increasing numbers and intensity of bad weather. Now, all of this is currently being addressed by those of you in the insurance sector. And what we've been able to do, thanks to the leadership of the Willis Group, we've been able to come together with the OASIS Catastrophic Risk Modelling Framework, and we now are going to design a connection between the OASIS Risk Modelling Framework and the digital regional platform and Bob's Earth simulation platform. And by doing that, we will enable insurance products to be thought about and brought to developing country regions with an evidence-based platform to enable those products to be more securely developed and taken forward. And so this should deal with one of the big problems that the World Bank and others are worried about, that these increasing climate risks may overwhelm us, and certainly overwhelm national governments who don't have access to regional or local insurance. So we're on the start of a journey, but I do believe genuinely that it's going to be able to make this connection work, and we're going to be working on that over the next year. So how do we scale this up? What's the process for scaling up? Well, basically, we've come up with the idea of a revolving fund. There are people willing to put money into building the platform, and that includes DFID, the UK aid programme. We're in the process of negotiating with the Climate Kick, the European Climate Kick. We're negotiating with the European Space Agency, the Chinese government, and multinational banks to build the platform. So I think we'll be able to build the platform. So how do we get it into as many cities as possible to enable them to take advantage of it? So the idea is to provide a loan facility from a revolving fund, and the loan would be made available so that this platform could be set up in any region of the world, and everyone will be able to use the platform locally free, and the model I talked about earlier will pay for the data out of the capital flow that comes through it. And basically, the region just has to agree to pay the money back, pay the loan back after 6 or 7 years, by which time this platform should have yielded really substantial public-private investment funding into good projects, and this amount of money will be fairly small beer. I have got the interest and agreement of a number of large organizations in the world willing to set up such accelerator scale-up funds. So, for example, in China, this could get into 500 cities, 1,000 cities really quickly to enable them to move forward in a better way. So where do you come in? Well, basically, this is the current setup of our demonstrator progress. All of these places, we're in active discussions about setting up demonstrations of this platform. I'm a very practical person. I believe this has got to be demonstrated. It's got to be very practical. It's got to be able to be used. And in China, we're making a lot of progress with a project in the city of Tianjin. We're making a lot of progress with the Mongolian government. With DFID, we'll be taking this platform into Africa. We're talking to the mayor of Rio about putting the platform into Rio ahead of the 2016 Olympic Games. And we have a region of the UK, which is the Dorset Local Enterprise Partnership, where we're doing a feasibility study to test this in Dorset. Now, the reason for that is that everyone says, where are you doing this at home? And I talked to 6 local enterprise partnerships, and Dorset expressed an interest. So we have the opportunity to do that. So basically, where you come in is that this platform requires user interfaces, cockpits as we call them, that need designing. So we need a cockpit for insurance, we need a cockpit for accountancy, we need a cockpit for setting up regional investment funds, we need cockpits for building services and so on. I would like you to come together in the city to actually be a partner in taking this platform forward, to help build the cockpits with some of your own expertise. And if you're interested to create apps that sit on the platform so your services can be sold as part of a connection to the platform if people are willing to pay for them. So those are the 2 areas I'd like to involve you in. So basically, you can help with all those processes, and I would like you to think about this as an opportunity similar to the Industrial Revolution. The amount of money that will be spent on taking the world to a sustainable place in 2050 is between $3 and $7 trillion. And this is the market that this platform could provide access for you to. And I will offer this platform to the City of London as a platform for the City of London to support the world to a better place in 2050. And I offer that because of Fiona, because it was Fiona's vision at the beginning of her year that said, this is what I want the city to do. So I'm here because of you, Fiona. And basically, that is the offer that's on the table to you. So basically, modeling cities will be possible with the platform. Connecting it to the regional, to the global model will be possible with the platform. And that general connection should enable the world to move to more sustainable place through collaboration. This is the start of a journey. All we're doing is trying to facilitate the start of a journey that I genuinely believe is possible. All the nuts and bolts of doing this are in place. A lot of the funding is coming through. But what I would like to do, what I would love to do, is to take Fiona's legacy forward, of her vision, and to work with as many organisations in the City of London to make this possible, because you have the intellectual capability, the capital, the skills to take the world to a sustainable place in 2050. You genuinely do. And I would love you to be part of the journey. Thank you.